Good morning, good morning, good morning. All right, there we go. Let me play around with our screen here a little bit. This is LinkedIn Live. I am Dr. Jimmy Henry. I represent the African American Male Wellness Agency. And today we're just going to talk about it, right? Um, I am joined today by John Coaxum, a licensed professional counselor. And the conversation will be centered around relationships and mental health. John, how you doing?
I'm doing well, man. Good morning. Glad to be here.
All right, all right. So tell us a little bit just about yourself and how you got into this work. What allows you to show up every day and serve the people that you serve.
Yeah, appreciate that. And first, man, I just want to, thank you. What you're doing and through this agency. I mean, you're doing God's work. You're doing great work, and
Oh,
it's
thank you.
very much needed in our day and time. So, I'm originally from South Carolina. Married, daughter. And I had a strong desire to go into ministry, which I did around 2005. Went off to school, got a Bachelor of Arts in theology, and then even went to seminary, got a Master's of Divinity, and was full time pastoring as I still am today. I've been doing that for over 13 years now. But partway along the way, I decided to go back to school. And to be honest, I've always had a love for the mind, had a love for helping people. One of the things that I love to tell people that I say on my website a lot is I love to help people connect the dots, which is helping them get from where they are to where they want to be. And I believe I can do that through ministry and through counseling. And so I always had a love for it. It's funny because when I was in school for pastoral ministry, I had a professor who actually said to me, if you make God your plan A, then you can't have a plan B. In other words, you can't hold these two things together. And so that
Hmm.
prevented me from going into clinical counseling for a while. Thank God for my wife, who encouraged me to do it. Went back to school, got a Master of Arts in clinical mental health counseling, and have been counseling ever since. So, to really answer your question as to what drives me and what's my passion, again, I love to help people connect the dots. And I also recognize that within the space of mental health, right, or even maybe just even helping professions, there is a dearth of people that look like me, right, or
Right.
males that look like me. And I'm proud to be in this space now, to be an example to those that come after me, and to be able to relate to those who have similar experiences that I do.
John, that is amazing. So in this, and we work in similar spaces, right?
Mhm.
I was trained in traditional medicine. Now I'm in the health and wellness space, doing coaching, life coaching, and leading our mental wellness initiative here called Real Men, Real Talk, right?
Mhm.
Where we provide just a safe space for men to express their emotions, what they're dealing with at work, in their relationships, things that they can't really share at home, sometimes even with their pastor.
That's right.
So, John, how do how do you create that space for someone, especially a man specifically,
Mhm.
to be able to kind of let their guard down and share what they're dealing with?
So yeah, a couple of things, and if you don't mind, I'll talk from the sort of from the pastoral side and from the clinical
Yeah,
side quickly. So
sure.
from the
Yeah, please.
pastoral side, one of the things that I have embraced is being open and somewhat vulnerable from the pulpit, right? And I think that in church life and church society and community, we've lifted up the pastor, and he is due honor, absolutely, the man or the woman of God, but at the same time, he is human. And he has frailties, he has faults, he's got all these different things going on in his life as well. And so, what I like to do is kind of, bring people back down to the human level and let them know, hey, I'm human too. And so
Right.
in many of my anecdotes and stories and illustrations from the pulpit, I will talk about the fact that I may struggle with this, or me and my wife, we may disagree on this. I use stories to help them understand that I'm a human. When it comes to clinical counseling, I do that from day one. Probably one of the first things I say is that I say, I take pride in letting you know that I am legally and ethically bound not to share anything you share with me with anyone else. Now, of course,
Mm.
confidentiality has limits, but I try to let them know, hey, this is a safe space. This is a brave space. You can talk about whatever you want. And then there is something that is sort of discouraged in counseling, at least when I was in school, that a mentor helped me to counteract. When I was in school, they kind of told us, hey, don't self disclose. Don't talk about your life, all these things.
Right.
So I stayed away from it for a long time, and I still use wisdom when I do it. But I have noticed, particularly with our population, that sharing some of the things that may relate to what they're going through actually helps people to sort of remove some of that anxiety when they're in counseling and to open up a bit more. So I will say, certain things to them to help them understand, hey, this is a safe space, this is a brave space. But I also intimately and experientially, I understand what you're talking about as well.
That is so powerful. John, pause 1 second. I'm going to try to adjust my screen here.
Okay.
So that we are. Let's see here. Maximize. And I need to bring you in. There we go. All right. Sorry about that. So, and I agree with you 100%. I believe that self-disclosure piece is so powerful. Even when we are in our men's group, men's ministry at church or community conversations, when you're facilitating and leading a group of men, you gotta lead from the front, right? You gotta set the example and show up in a way. So a lot of the work that I think that we do requires us to be in a space of intentional about our own healing process, right? Yeah. Of course, there's some discernment about what to share and what not to share and when to share it. But I think that if we want to free, especially men in our community, for what they're dealing with, we have to really show them the way, right?
Absolutely.
And get into our conversation about relationships and mental health. Help our audience today. How would you define the mental health part, and then how would you define relationships?
Yeah, it's a big one, right? So, I mean, relationships are so massive. I don't know if there is one single definition really that can cover it all, but I did hear one that was very interesting, and I posted about it not too long ago on my channel. Someone said that relationships are basically who you allow influence in your life. That's all it is. It's just who you allow influence. And no matter the type of relationship or maybe even how long, they're going to exert some level of influence on you and possibly you on them. And the longer they're in your life, the more extreme that influence. The reason mental health comes into play with this is because for me, that's one of the first things that I ask clients when I'm beginning to talk with them. I'll ask them about symptoms, and I'll ask them, do you have a strong social support system? In other words, do you at least have one person that you can talk to about the issues in life? I'm not talking about a medical professional such as yourself or a mental health expert. I'm talking about just a friend that you can text or call and say, I'm going through a tough time. Can we meet for coffee? Can we talk a little bit? And to be honest with you, when someone doesn't have at least one strong relationship, I mean, bells go off in my head as a counselor. I mean, it's just, what I'm saying? It's massive red flags, because essentially this is a person who is holding everything in, who is bottling everything in. And what is, naturally going to happen is that all of this stuff is probably going to come spilling out one day at the most inconvenient time, and actually contributes to mental health disorders and diagnoses as well. So relationships are integral to our mental health. They allow us to sort of, shed some of our feelings, express some of them so that we're not bottling them up. And then also, hey, I'll go to the Bible. A friend, the Bible says, is born for adversity, right? That's what the Bible says. And, being able to talk to somebody is extremely helpful for well-being. Yeah,
that's so good. We talk about being our brother's keeper and how iron sharpens iron, et cetera, et cetera. But you'd be surprised. Well, you're probably not surprised, but there are so many men who don't have that one person to lean on. And even when we do, it's very superficial, casual. It's kind of like, let's go watch the game. Let's get a drink or something. But that kind of deep dive about like what's going on, I think too many men don't take advantage of that opportunity to have that person. If you don't have that person, seek that person, right? Be intentional about building a relationship that's built on something more significant on a deeper level than just work or play, right?
Yeah,
that's really good. So when we're talking about those relationships,
Mhm.
and the impact that they may have on our mental health.
Mhm.
What relationships, and I know that you work a lot in the couple space, in
Mhm.
the
Sure.
romantic relationship space.
Mhm.
Let's sit there for a bit. How do those relationships have an impact on our mental health?
It can have a major one. So let's talk about the good and the bad. So the
Yeah,
good,
yes, let's do it. Yeah.
marriage has a lot of benefits, man, and it's just
Mhm.
so fun. I think I just posted today or yesterday about, I think it was Paul Pierce. I'm not sure who was like, marriage is for poor people. There's really no
Did he
benefit
say that?
to it.
Okay.
Yeah, I promise
Okay.
you, he
Okay.
said that poor
Yeah.
people,
Yeah.
old people, and I think he
Mhm.
said there's no benefit for men or whatever. But I'm sure from studies and,
Mhm.
and other
Mhm.
research, man, marriage is replete with benefits, health wise, mental health wise. They're even saying that financially you're likely to do
Mhm.
better because two can work together. We
Yeah. Yeah.
understand all of that, so there's good benefits for that, but also to their support. My wife is, she's my friend, and she's my best friend really in a lot of
Right.
ways, and I know that there's at least one place in this world where I can come and I'm going to be fully accepted at all times.
Mhm.
Right. And that's when I come home to my wife. She's going to hold my head up. She's going to support me. Now, I ain't going to lie to you. We disagree sometimes. You know what I'm
Sure.
saying? We
Sure.
butt
Sure.
heads, but she's my wife and I can trust her with certain information as well. And so in times when I'm feeling beat down by the world, she actually lifts me up. The bad side of being in a romantic relationship that doesn't facilitate mental health or doesn't help well-being is that it can contribute to a loss of identity, self-esteem, self-worth. If someone is not, how do I say this, responsible enough, they can really damage you. Okay. And
Mhm.
and let me let
Mhm.
me be even more clear about this. If I wanted to, Doc, man, I could destroy my wife emotionally. I
Right.
could
Right. Right.
I can
Yeah.
completely and utterly destroy her.
Mhm.
And she could
Mhm.
do the same for me.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
reason I can do that and she can do that is because we spend so much time together. We begin to innately know each other's weaknesses and insecurities and the inherent little, I know where all the bodies are buried. I know where all the
Mhm.
skeletons are and all
Mhm.
that kind of
Mhm.
stuff. I could pull that out and I could, shoot straight at the heart and destroy
Mhm.
her, man. And
Mhm.
what I do find is that there are a lot of couples that are choosing that nuclear option. It's okay
Mhm.
to fight, but they don't fight fair. And
Wow.
and,
Wow.
and so when you are a person who is irresponsible with the weaknesses of your spouse or your significant other, you will use that to damage them. And after a while, let me get to your question. Now, after a while, it will beat down a person so much that mental health concerns and even mental health disorders can arise. People can
Right.
go into fits of depression, suffer with generalized anxiety disorder, trauma, of course, abuse, all of these different types of things, which obviously means that when we choose someone to spend the rest of our life with, we should choose well.
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
that's the good, the bad, and the ugly of it, right? They say
Yeah.
that's the most important decision you'll make, besides choosing your faith. I believe, but
Absolutely.
that definitely determines the trajectory of your life. So with
Mhm.
that said, there are many people, especially we're on LinkedIn, a professional platform. There are
Sure.
so many professionals who feel like, you know what, I've matriculated through school, I've earned my credentials and degrees, I've built this up by myself. Why would I take that risk, right, to expose myself and everything that I've built with
Mm,
someone?
it's good.
Why would I bring our assets together if there's a possibility? And these days, the rates are approaching 50%, if not more. I know in the medical
Mhm.
world, doctors are probably some of the more highly divorced uh, professions. Why would someone in a professional space take that leap and take that risk?
Yeah, the first thing that came to mind when you said the word risk is, in many cases in life, no risk, no reward, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
relationships in and of themselves, they are risk. I talk about this on my podcast. If you're not willing to risk anything or to put yourself out there or to be vulnerable, then relationships probably aren't for you, right?
yeah,
Because
yeah.
that's what it calls for. I have to be not only responsible and accountable to my wife now that I'm in a committed relationship with her, but I also have to be vulnerable with her. And then I would go back to what I said earlier about the benefits. There's proof positive research out there and evidence that even as, if you're a business person or what have you, or have a business or have wealth or means, that wealth or means could actually increase, right?
Right.
Just by being married. And
Right.
I saw something the other day, and forgive me if I can't, quote the exact news source or what have you, but it was on social media. But it was saying that the majority of millionaires, they're married, and
Mm-hmm.
and they remain married, right?
Right. Right.
And there has to be something to that as well.
Absolutely.
Um, but I would caution. I'd back up a
Mhm.
little bit and say that if you are a person who is flat out against, "Yeah, I'm not telling my wife or husband anything. I don't want to share nothing. I don't want to be vulnerable," then maybe marriage or a committed relationship may not be the best thing for you. I personally think it's the ideal, but I can understand why some people may not.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Yeah.
So I'm full transparency. I'm divorced, have been for
Hmm.
a few years, but I still believe in the possibility of marriage. Marriage is a covenant that
Yeah,
um, is there's a beauty in it, right? And I think
absolutely.
that people shouldn't give up on that idea. It's not
Sure.
marriage a problem. I think people are the problem, right? Kind of choosing the right
That's right.
person
That's
to
right.
partner with long term. And a
Hmm.
lot of the men that that I work with, they're kind of in this space of kind of date relationship hopping, right? So kind of going from
Ooh.
person to person, partner to partner, and I feel like that's symptomatic of something. What have you seen?
Oh, I've definitely seen that. People hopping in and out, just not wanting to commit. And I mean, there's a fear there, right? And
Yeah.
I'm not, bashing them or insulting anybody who has that fear. It's understandable. The fear is that, I stand to lose a lot if
Hmm.
I do get married and it doesn't work out. I
Yeah.
stand to lose a lot if, whatever, if we're fighting all the time, whatever the situation is.
Right. Right.
So I completely understand that. I come from a faith worldview. I come from a
Yeah.
Bible perspective.
Hmm.
And so for me, when I look at it from that perspective, I just think that being in a committed relationship when possible is just the best option for a person. And also, too, right? For men, it, yeah, we see a lot of men in society today who have means
Hmm.
and get caught up in a lot of different things, right?
Right. Right. Right.
One of the most recent ones, I won't share his name or whatever,
Right.
contribute to
Right.
him,
Right.
but he was caught
We.
up in it, okay?
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
not saying that marriage solves everything, but it can be one of those barriers and boundaries and sort of safeguards that may keep you from making some of the other mistakes. Marriage, or at least some type of committed relationship when possible.
Right. Right. So thank you for bringing it up.
Yeah.
And so what kind of brings to my mind is sometimes men may use different things. They may use gambling. They may use
Hmm.
drugs. They may
Hmm.
use overworking. They may use different
Yeah.
things, including women or romantic relationships, to avoid
That's a good point.
dealing with their own mental wellness and health issues. And I
Sure.
think that pattern, if we are to identify it early enough, because when you're chasing happiness, we know it's temporary, right? You want to get
Sure.
to a space of where you want to experience joy even in the
Hmm.
midst of struggle. But
Hmm.
that dopamine surge seeking activity becomes problematic, and only thing that can really address it is some self-reflection, right? And maybe that is a point where you need to sit down with a brother, talk to a therapist, someone who's willing to listen and identify that. Would you agree with that?
Oh, 100%. I'm glad you brought that up because you're right. I mean, hopping around in relationships or just, doing relationships badly, whatever that means,
Right.
doing
Yeah.
it badly, you're right, can be symptomatic of, never being taught what relationships are, having a
Hmm.
bad view of it. I counsel individuals all the time, men and women, as a matter of fact, who they cannot point to one good relationship in their entire family. Not one that has lasted. And so you can understand why they may be, a little more promiscuous or not be able to settle down or maybe not be able to make a relationship work or just be insecure in general.
Hmm.
with the opposite sex. These are things that I see all the time. So definitely, and I think it is incumbent upon men and fathers to reach down to our sons and our daughters as well, but main also to our men, and sort of let them know what relationships are. And watch this, to be vulnerable enough to
Right.
say, these are the mistakes I made, and I
Mhm.
wish I hadn't. I
Yeah.
actually regret this. And I will tell you, man, one of the reasons I've made mistakes, plenty of them, but one of the reasons why I haven't made probably as many mistakes as other people is that my father was fairly honest with me, probably more honest than I want. I was like, I don't know if I want to, but
Right.
he will
TMI
share.
dad.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? But in a tasteful way, and in a respectful way, but he would share mistakes that he has made and give me encouragement. And that's really helped me to in my relationships and with myself, validating myself and understanding my own self-worth.
Yeah, that's powerful, because I think in our culture, we
Mhm.
have this mentality, what happens in our house stays in our house, and what happens in parents' bedroom or between them just stays between them,
You
right?
better
Stay out
not
of
say anything. Yep.
but I think that transparency of the generation before us can free us and kind of break that cycle, a certain pattern that we find ourselves in, right? There's a
Sure.
higher probability, if you don't know what issues, we're going to get spiritual with it, spirits your parents were dealing with, then you
Mhm.
won't know how to attack or address them, right? And these cycles keep repeating and repeating and repeating.
Absolutely.
And one cycle that's very prevalent, we kind of touched on it, is divorce. There's divorce is so prevalent in a lot of communities, and there are men, especially, who are dealing in silence with let's just say, the disaster of divorce. I know people have divorce parties and they celebrate it, but
Yeah.
I
Right.
think when you are kind of ripping two people apart, there's some damage there, right? So
Absolutely.
how do you work with men who may be dealing with grieving marriage?
It's tough.
Yeah.
We first start by, understanding the situation. I tend not to just, dive in and, bash the other person or what have you. I try to get as much of the story as I can and get context, get their understanding of, what has happened in the relationship. Um, because it's possible that what has happened in this relationship, they may carry over into the other. Not saying
Right.
it's their fault, but there may be some habits, some tendencies, some behaviors that contributed.
Yeah.
Right. And again, I posted about this the other day too, that I think in practically every situation, right, when it comes to relationships, every person has their part to play.
Yeah.
I have yet to, and now people will come into the counseling office, and they
Oh,
will make it seem like, yo, they did this,
right.
pointing fingers the entire time. And I gotta I let them talk for a little bit, but then I come back to them and say, okay, now what did you contribute to this situation? And sometimes that takes weeks right there just to get them to open up and admit that. But I think the biggest thing is helping them to move forward. Um,
Mhm.
I'm reading this book now by Esther Perel called The State of Affairs, and it's a powerful book. And one of the things she says is that, after, infidelity or a breakup or divorce or whatever, she says that she shares with clients that she says, your first marriage is over. Do you want to make a new one? Right? Do you
Mhm.
want to move forward? And that's where eventually I have to get people. So I spend a long time getting context, understanding their situation, and understanding their behaviors, maybe going back, not maybe, definitely going back into their childhood, understanding their tendencies and habits with relationships, their history with other people. And then after that, we go into, trying to help them, if they want, create better relationships going forward and understanding themselves.
That's really good.
Yeah.
So moving forward, and a
Yep.
lot of people find that in that grieving period that they're stuck,
Hmm.
and they're stuck and they're sinking and
Hmm.
don't know how to get out. So sounds like accountability is one of the first things to acknowledge to help someone move forward.
Yeah.
Um, I think what I've seen just by talking to different people, I think one is fear.
Hmm.
Just when you've been hurt and traumatized or whatever happened, the situation, there's apprehension to re-expose yourself again. And then
Oh.
you may never benefit from the beauty of what you're trying to seek.
Hmm.
So I think fear is definitely one. Um, and
Huge.
then I think when someone is trying to move forward, um, they really need to set some goals. Like, what exactly are you looking for? If you want to take like kind of like a business model to it,
Hmm.
I mean, you have a goal, you may have deadlines to it, but then you break down from where you are to where you want to be into some steps,
Right.
and you take one step at a time to get you to where you want to be. I think you maybe take that same model and, do you want a new one? Do you want to do this again?
Hmm.
Get out of the stuckness of grieving and moving forward. Maybe set some smaller steps to then get there, right? So what some are those other steps that help someone get there?
Yeah, 100%. I think you hit the nail on the head. Setting goals, and I would also add, setting boundaries as well.
Hmm. Hmm.
About what you not only what you want to tolerate or accept, but also what can you accept, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
do
What's your
I?
capacity?
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
This is gonna sound funny. I don't even know how to say this better. I'm trying to think. Like, I do I are there okay? Are there some things about my wife I'm just like, yeah, that bothers me. The way you do that, maybe the way
Mhm,
she, puts folds clothes, whatever. It could be
mhm,
something
yeah,
insignificant. The point is, can you deal with that? Right.
mhm,
I think
right,
people need to understand what their non-negotiables are, because eventually this could really, affect your mental health if there is something that your significant other does with any amount of regularity that bothers you or that you cannot live with. You need to know that. And
right,
you need to
right,
be able to decide, hey, can I stay with this person? So, setting boundaries, setting goals, which is something that I try to get couples to do when they come see me for couples counseling, because I try to get them aligned, right? If you have
yeah,
goals, something that you're shooting for, and it's the same thing even in individual lives, when you have something that you're shooting for, man, you can work together, right? It,
yeah,
it
yeah,
greatly increases your chances of meeting that goal and reaching that destination. But definitely, I just have to put this plug in here for therapy. Please,
yeah,
if you have gone through, especially a turbulent breakup or ending of a relationship, please go and see someone. It's like getting your car or oil change and getting a checkup. I think these things are important before you move on to the next one.
absolutely. That's really good. And I'll add one more thing. I think that
Sure.
um, forgiveness, I think, is a huge part of trying to get unstuck. Forgiving, the whatever part you played in your previous failures,
Hmm.
forgiving the other person for every part that
Hmm.
they played. And I
Hmm.
think that once you forgive, then you can remove that resentment and kind of carrying that baggage with you, moving forward. Now, I was talking to a group just yesterday, can you forgive? And they always say forgive and forget.
Mm.
Like, so I don't know that if our brains are ever really wired to forget. Sometimes we think we forget things,
Hmm.
but you have memories from when you were 2 and 3
Absolutely.
years old, right? So I don't know
Absolutely.
that we
Yeah.
can truly forget, but I think the forgetting part is not holding that against someone, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Not bringing it up repeatedly, not interacting with them in a way that, especially if you were, let's say, co-parenting, not holding those grievances against them
Hmm.
when it doesn't apply, right? So I think forgiveness is a huge part of it too.
Yeah, and it's like we always say, it's mainly for you,
Hmm.
not for the other person. Because here's the thing, it's very possible that the other person did 90% of the wrong, right?
Hmm.
I don't know. I'm not even going to speculate what that is, but the other person did it. But you are still responsible for how
Hmm.
you move going forward, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so this is really just for you to sort of let that person stop living rent free in your mind and allow yourself to move forward. But I would caution, you should probably not forgive too soon. And I know that sounds crazy, right?
Ooh.
Because yeah,
Okay.
I know, because I'm a person of faith too, and that's a big tenet of faith is
Yeah.
forgive immediately. Da, 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 da. But I don't want people to have this sort of sense of forgiveness as, it wasn't a big deal. Let me move on. That type of thing. That's not what really forgiveness is about. It's coming to terms with what has happened, recognizing that it happened. I can't go back and change the past, but I can start from now and make a new ending for myself. And I'm choosing to let this person go. So I think when we come to a point where we're just like, nothing happened, well, that's almost selective amnesia. And I don't want that. Yeah.
Correct. No, that's really good. And I think that it sounds like there's a process involved.
Exactly.
With anything, you don't want to skip steps.
Exactly.
And though you may be trying to avoid some of the pain immediately, it may catch up to you long term, right?
100%.
So I think that great conversation around romantic relationships,
sure,
marriage, even divorce, right? But some of the other relationships that we deal with, especially as professionals, relationships at work, right? Some of those relationships can also play into our mental health. So how do you help someone? Let's say they are in a difficult work environment. People use let's say a toxic work culture or a difficult supervisor. And their performance is really dependent on this relationship. How do you kind of help them navigate that space and its effect on their mental health?
Yeah, tough, man. That's really tough. And there's no silver bullet. I would say first and foremost, communication is everything, man. I mean, I don't, a lot of the things that I see in the counseling room, to be honest with you, it's almost like I should have been a marriage and family therapist because I mean, most of what I see is because of these interpersonal relationships. That's why people come. I have a problem with this. I can't get through to my husband. My boss does this. It's all relationships in some way, shape, or form. So I think people should, really invest in tailoring or tuning up their communication skills. And I'm actually going to put out a few courses in a few here about that, and hopefully save some people some months in counseling through this, man. So that number one, having a better sort of emotional intelligence, because there are times where we can misconstrue things that someone may be saying to us at work, at home, or in other relationships, right? That's not really what they meant, but because we have gone through trauma or we've been triggered, we blow up on them, and it didn't really call for that. And then we lose the job, and it's like, whoa, what happened? What's going on? People don't even know what's going on. So I think communication and understanding our emotional intelligence and regulating ourselves is really what's fundamentally important in managing those relationships. And then thirdly, I would say we cannot depend completely on work, even our marriages or whatever, to make us happy all the time. Okay.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I know you love what you do. I love what I do. But are there frustrating parts of what you do? Of course.
Gotcha.
You know what I'm saying? Are there anxieties associated with it? Absolutely. And so what we need to be able to have ways of sort of mitigating some of that stress that we feel, even at something that we love. And one of the big things that I'm an advocate for is having a hobby, having something where you can take that anxious energy and put it into something productive. And I'll talk about me as an African-American male. All right. What I do. And I'm a serial hobbyist. It's actually kind of bad, but anyway, I do woodworking, man. And I taught myself on YouTube. I just, man, my wife was like, yo, where is it? Man. I'm in the garage, man. I'm literally like half the stuff in my house I've literally made. I've just made it because I'm anxious about something, maybe finances, maybe work, taking off some of the stress of dealing with other clients. I need to put it somewhere. I taught myself to play the guitar. I cut hair. I love doing stuff outside in the lawn. This helps to mitigate some of that stress so that you're not ruminating on it and you come home after work, you close the blinds and you're laying in your bed until you get up to go to work again. So those three things. Sorry,
that's great because men, they say in romantic relationships, men are very visual, but I think in this space, men are very physical, right? Like
Yeah,
tactile. I
that's
think
good.
those type of things play into our natural state of being. So, uh, you know, building, crafting, you know, going to the gym, um,
Yes,
you
yes.
know, building up your body, your temple. Uh, I like to golf. I'm not great at golf by any
Come on,
means,
man.
but I like the idea of being out in nature. I'm not an outdoorsman, but the golf course
Mhm.
will do. So, things like that. Whatever suits you, I think uh, men need to
Yeah.
uh, understand it's okay to take care of yourself. Like find things that interest you.
Mhm.
You know, uh, go get a manicure. Like go get a
Sure.
massage. Go do anything that can help you relax and take some of that, like you said, angst and anxiety from work at home away, right? And so like people sometimes expect because you love what you do or you
Mm.
love being who you're with, that's always going to be, you know, peaches, ice
Yeah.
cream. It's not going to be rainbows every single day, right? So understand
Exactly.
there's good, bad comes with the good, but weathering those storms and hobbies and self care help men do just that.
Yeah, and I just want to say, man, you're right. And but I'm just gonna be honest, man. Golf actually causes me anxiety, man. So I played a few times, man, but it's probably the most frustrating sport I've ever played. But anyway,
It is, man, but I like it, so
Mhm.
whatever works for you.
Right, right.
And I think that you kind of touched it,
Mhm.
when we have these, anxiety, fear, anger, whatever these emotions are that we're
Mhm.
dealing with and trying to process it, if we don't mitigate it or eliminate it, right, those emotions they're going to express themselves
They're gonna
at
come
some
out.
they're,
Yep.
they're, they're going to come out. So whether we express them in a healthy manner, either by communicating them, speaking, journaling, doing something, a hobby, something physical to get that out, or they're gonna come out whether we like them to or not. Like you said, maybe at the inopportune time, it
Yep.
may cost you a promotion, it may
That's
cause
right.
you a business deal,
Mhm.
and I think this is a preventative strategy that we
Mhm.
should be more intentional about blocking time out for. Um,
Yep.
so, what are some other tools like self care, hobbies? What are some other tools that even I think you even developed something? What are some tools that can help someone kind
Yep.
of cope with the stresses that they may be dealing with?
Yeah, and I have. So I created, for those who, value God or value faith or faith is a part of their life and mental health, I actually created a card deck. It's called Numa Cards. And
Hmm.
basically it's a first of its kind, absolutely unique, faith-based therapeutic resource. And basically it has 53 cards in the deck, and each one that you pull out gives you a text, from the Bible. And by the way, for anyone who may not, believe in the Bible, even if you're not a believer, it has great wisdom that people
Hmm.
who don't even believe in God have used for many of our laws have been, crafted from the wisdom
Absolutely.
of the Bible.
Hmm.
So it has a scriptural text there. It has a open-ended reflection question, which is the same thing that I do in counseling. So not yes or no answer questions, but open-ended to help you process and reflect and think. And then also it has a task because I'm just a huge believer in being practical. Everything I
Hmm.
do, I want to help people be practical. I'm like, yo, why are we talking about it if you're not going to help me do something or
Right.
get to where I want to go?
Mhm.
So it's actually divided into three different categories. Your relationship with God, your relationship with yourself, which is a big, huge topic,
Yeah. Yeah.
and your relationship with others. And you can pick this up on, my website, johncoxum.com. So this and other things like this, stuff that helps you think and helps you process through what you may be going through. We already talked about friendships,
Mhm.
but groups of any kind,
Mhm.
men's groups where you can just come and sit and talk, where you have commonalities. The other day, Doc, you had the what was it? The faith leaders lunch
Luncheon.
that I
Yeah.
was at, and
Yeah.
it was just a blessing, man. It was powerful just to be around other faith leaders who understand exactly what I'm going through. Just
Yeah.
being
Exactly.
in the space, I didn't
Mhm.
have very many conversations, but I have a few, and each of them were impactful. And one of the gentlemen there, poured into me.
Mhm.
That was powerful. So when
Yeah.
I come into these spaces, I leave with something. So I would say, scour the internet, find resources that could help you, but also right where you are locally, find groups where people have commonalities like you, other men, and I believe it'll go a long way.
That is so good, and that's essentially the work that we do, right? Creating these spaces for men to come together to get out of that though there may be some benefits of being alone at times, feeling isolated is not a
Yes,
space you want to be in for too long. So we're meant to
absolutely.
fellowship, right?
Yeah,
As human beings, and and I like your approach, and this is why I asked you to come on, right? This intersection between the spiritual and the mental, because I mean
mhm,
I believe in faith and therapy. Like
sure.
it's worked for me. It's taken me out of a dark space during when life was
Yeah,
life in,
sure.
and
Yeah,
and both helped me get to where I am now. So I just salute you for the work that you're doing, able to
appreciate it.
articulate, right, the importance of doing both and then developing something, right, where someone can actually have a practical tool. I think I mean one of the issues that have found
Mhm.
when we are talking about mental health and wellness is in our community there can be an over spiritualization of it, right? Like, so it can, there's
Woo.
much power in prayer, but then when we're blessed with these practical tools and we're blessed with experts like yourself to not take advantage of them,
Mhm.
how do you, I don't want to say convince, but how do you help someone get out of, like, Jesus take the wheel and fix it, and say, you know what, uh, I'm here on assignment, right, to help you. Like, how do you help them move from point A to point?
Woo. Let's see how much time we got, man.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Let me try.
Yeah.
Okay, real quick, real quick. I'll make this quick. So, we sort of practice, and you're right, in our community, we practice something sometimes called spiritual bypass, and it's almost subconscious, where we sort of bypass or leap over real issues in order to run to a sort of spiritual cliche. Right.
Mhm.
Which is, God closed the door, but he's going to open the window. It's true. I actually believe that. Is it in the
Mhm.
Bible? Probably not. No.
Mhm.
Okay, it's not there. At least that phrase. But
Paraphrase.
the sentiment is true. But also, many times in the Bible, what we find is that, man, the Bible says faith without works is dead. More
Mhm.
often than not, God does not do everything for everybody, but he gives them the tools, the resources, and the people more often than not to
Mhm.
help them to be able to navigate whatever they're dealing with. So when people, especially in a church community, will say, well, you just need to pray. Yes, we do need to pray, but God has also given experts knowledge, wisdom, understanding to help us be able to deal with the issues of life. Take yourself for an example. You're a doctor, and when someone gets, they're, let's say they're outside and they're dealing with heavy machinery, and they cut their arm off.
Mhm.
I'm a pastor, and I come over and I say, man, that looks really bad, let's pray about it. I mean,
Mhm.
the person is going to be yelling, yo, are you serious?
Yeah.
Call
Yeah.
911
Absolutely.
immediately. Call Dr.
Absolutely.
Henry, I need help.
Yeah.
You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So we have no issue doing that in a physical emergency. But what about our minds? When
Mhm.
when our minds are cut off or
Yeah.
injured or broken in some way, we need help. And I think that we should be wise enough to trust the experts that God has entrusted with wisdom, mental health counselors, marriage and family therapists, psychologists, even psychiatrists, which is something that
Mhm.
a lot of people in our
Mhm.
community are
Mhm.
much against. I believe
Yeah.
that we should trust them with that. I believe God has given us the tools, and we should be wise with it. And let me just say one quick thing about medication, if you don't mind, because I know this
Yeah.
is your wheelhouse as well.
Mhm.
As counselors, we don't push medication right off the bat. That's
Mhm.
not our wheelhouse.
Right.
But what we are trained to see when simple talk therapy may not be enough for someone. And we're talking about those things that may be on the extreme end of disorders like schizophrenia and other personality disorders. There are times when some individuals need medication just to be able to regulate the biological and chemical things that are happening in their body and in their brain. And then we can also bring talk therapy along with it. So I don't want anybody in the faith community to think that if you take medication that you lack faith, or that, you know, you don't believe in God. Again, that's what we call spiritual bypass. And a lot of our people suffer because we think that God is supposed to, you know, show up like Superman in every single situation. And that's just not often the way God works.
Right. Without us putting in the work.
Right. Right.
And you know, there are instances in the Bible actually where there are people who are skilled, who are trained and skilled to do a thing. For example, to build a temple, right?
Yep.
But then they're also blessed with the gift of the Spirit, right? And that combination, I believe, should resonate with the faith community to understand that, you know, God's going to send people your way with both the Spirit and the skill to help you in a situation, right?
Absolutely.
And to kind of, you know, bring things home, when we're talking about relationships and mental health, we talked about, you know, relationships with God, relationships with others. Let's get into relationship with yourself a little bit more. Okay. And we kind of hinted earlier about how sometimes people are medicating with other things to avoid that opportunity to develop a keen relationship with yourself. So, I mean, how important is that getting to know yourself, or sometimes getting to re-know yourself?
I think it's massively important. I can't even overstate it, right? This is how people end up in, you know, literal existential crises. They don't know who they are. Identity is huge. I will say that I think people of faith may have a distinct advantage in this, right? Because what we believe is that, you know, that identity is already secure for us. We already know what that is. We don't have to go out and find it and figure it out. We simply have to accept it. But for other people who may not have, you know, any kind of faith or any grounding or any faith whatsoever, they may not have that. And later on in life, they can end up in, like I said, that existential crisis. So yes, you have a relationship with yourself. And in my card deck, a lot of the questions that are asked are questions about you know, your habits, your triggers, sort of getting you to think about why you do certain things. Now, there seems to be a wave on social media now of people saying, well, we don't need to spend that much time in your childhood talking about what happened when you grew up and stuff like that. And I agree, we shouldn't spend, you know, all of our time doing that. However, that is massively important to who you are. We are all, in many ways, a cocktail of the different experiences that we have had when we were younger. You'd be surprised how many Black men I talk to, and what I ask, and men in general, all right, but I know we're talking to Black men as well. Men I talk to, and I ask them, did your dad say they love you and they were proud of you? You'd be surprised how many men say, no, I cannot remember a time when daddy said that to me, right? They will say, well, he provided, you know what I'm saying? We had a roof over our head and stuff like that. But the words are important as well. And they speak to our identity and who we become. Did you see mommy and daddy fight? Were they divorced? You know, were you teased? Were you bullied? Did you play sports? Did girls like you? Were you popular? All of these different things contribute to who we are. The problem is many of us in our adulthood, we have not taken any time to think about that. No time, right? But what we don't realize is that everything that we are right now is generally connected to that, right? So the down to the jokes we laugh at, the type of clothes we wear, the music we listen to, all of these things sort of stem back to that. And so I think, yes, we have a relationship with ourselves, and every single person needs to have the benefit of knowing who they are as a person so that they can be secure in how they show up in the world and in every relationship.
That is so good. Knowing who you are, right? We get caught up in doing and performing, but we're human beings first, not human doings. And I think that when you reflect to your childhood, you know, I believe our essence of who we are obviously develops in the womb even. So
Yeah.
we are who we are, but then we're shaped by life's experiences. So, if I were to tell someone your relationships with others would improve when you get to know yourself. If I said your performance at work would improve when you get to know yourself, right? That affects how you show up. And then those people closest to you, especially at an early stage of development, ask them, they help speak to your identity, right? And
That's good.
hopefully as you continue to mature and grow, you surround yourself with people who you trust that continue to speak to your identity. But you got to have a secure foundation of who you are first. So I think that's just so critical as we're talking about, ways to use relationships, right? Build them, nurture them, grow them so that we can improve our mental health. And I thank you, John, just for sharing your expertise, your perspective today. I was really blessed by spending time with you, brother. It's been good to get to know you recently. But before we depart, any final words of advice, and how can someone stay in contact with you?
Yeah, thank you. And this has been a pleasure as well. You can reach me on practically any platform at John Coaxum LPC. At John Coaxum, just how my name is spelled, LPC, on YouTube. I now have a podcast called the John Coaxum Podcast. Makes it very easy for you to get it. And also my website is johncoaxum.com. You can find the Numa cards there as well. And I am in the process right now, Doc, of finishing a course, like I said before, on communication, especially for those who are in relationships. Now, it speaks to romantic, relationships, or, dating, engage, marry. But the information is so foundational. I think it's going to help people at any stage in their life. So that'll be out really soon. Look out for that. And I'm really excited. But you can see me anywhere at John Coaxum LPC.
I definitely appreciate you for coming on. And again, the African American Male Wellness Agency, our goal really is to save Black men's lives. We holistically support them and their families. As director of our mental wellness initiative, Real Men, Real Talk, these spaces, John, we're creating across the country. We're in 20 plus cities this year, touring and having men, giving them that opportunity to get to know themselves, get to develop their relationship with themselves in a preventative way to help address mental health issues. So you can follow us at aawellness.org. Follow us online at AA Wellness Agency. Thank you for your time today. Take care and God bless.
Take care.
All right.